Hey everybody, so today we're going to make a leather bracelet with some brass hardware, and I figured we don't do many bracelets, so we're going to give this a go. It's a nice simple project. You can use scrap leather, so let's get into it. So I have pretty big wrists, so I'm going to go with a 3/4 inch size. The only piece of hardware you need is a buckle. You can go with, I'm going to use a heel bar buckle, got a little roller, and that way we can use a keeper, and it'll almost be like a big watch strap. Your other option is you can use something like a center bar buckle, and that way you don't need to make a keeper on top of everything else. Just a little bit more of a cleaner look, but I really like this one. These are 3/4 inch. Because I have big wrists, you're probably, if you have smaller wrists, you can go with a 1/2 inch. You could go with 1 inch, you can make a big cuff, you know, if you want to go Johnny Depp style, you could do that too, but we're going to use 3/4 inch. So the first thing we need to do is cut a 3/4 inch strip of leather. I want this bracelet to have a little more dimension, so I'm going to do a leather core as well that's just going to kind of pop the center out and make it a little more sturdy. What I want to do is I'm going to make that about half the width of this strip. This is 3/4 of an inch, so I'm going to make this about 3/8 of an inch. So the next thing we need to do is cut our slot for our buckle to go in. I'm going to use, this is just a slot punch, and I marked about 2 inches down from one end, and depending on your wrist, I'm making this size to my wrist, right? So I can give you the widths, the lengths, just give yourself a ton of extra length and then fit it to your wrist if you're making this at home. So what I'm doing is I left 2 inches because what we're gonna do is we're gonna fold this over, the buckle is gonna come right here. Then we're gonna use some of that core to make a keeper, almost like a watch strap. And then the core, after the keeper, is gonna go in for the body of the bracelet. So if I start 2 inches down, when I fold this over, I'll be able to have my keeper here and the core here, and then like a watch strap, we're gonna glue this, and then we're gonna glue, we'll skive the end down, and then we'll glue the rest to a liner that's gonna be the same leather. It just gives it a sort of a seamless transition on the bottom side, so you don't really feel it. So we'll just get into that now, and I'll kind of talk you through it with a little more detail. Once we have our slot punched, which is where our buckle is going to go, we need to leave room for our keeper, but then we need to glue in our liner piece. So what I've done is I've marked 5/8 of an inch from the end of the buckle slot, and that'll allow us to slide our keeper in there once we have the rest of it assembled and we know how wide this keeper needs to be. And then I marked my own personal size, which is 7.5 inches, and I cut my liner piece to 7.5 inches. And what that's going to allow us to do is that this liner is going to end right before the sizing holes start, so that we're not putting full thickness through the buckle. It'll keep it a little more low profile. So now all I have to do is I'm going to nip the end of this off with my skive knife so that there's a smooth transition. I'm not going to do it on the top because remember, we're going to have a single layer thickness of our keeper. So I'm going to keep this full thickness so that it transitions from the keeper to the core. But on this side, I kind of want to fade it out. So I'm just going to do like a quick little skive on that side, and then we'll glue it in. So once we have our little core thing glued in, this is 3/4 inch, I cut a 1 inch strip and I squared off one end. This is going to be our back. And I'm doing this a little weird. You can do this if you make watch straps. You can do it however you make your watch straps. It's very similar. What I'm going to do is I'm going to skive down the edge here, and I'm going to glue this liner in a 1/2 inch down from where our core starts. And the reason I'm going to do this is so that once our buckle's in and this folds over, I'm going to skive this part down and they'll overlap and it'll be kind of seamless. But I'm going to put this in first and get everything trimmed and shaped so that I can kind of mock everything up with our buckle and figure out exactly how big our keeper needs to be so that when I put it in here, it's exactly the right size. So we're going to skive this first, but I'm actually going to skive on the grain side of this, not the flesh side, and then I'll skive on the flesh side of this end so that when they overlap, they lock in and the glue takes really well. I'm going to do a 1/4 inch skive, so I've marked my calipers for a 1/4 inch, and that way the skive on both ends will be exactly even, and now I'm just going to skive that down. So we have our skived end here. I'm going to flip this over and we're going to glue over our liner. And I'm just going to glue this whole thing. I'm not going to need it all, but I want to have a little bit extra. Our holes are going to be here. And then I just have this lined up. I'm going to glue this all the way down as well. This is our underside. And when you're doing this, you want to make sure that you get lots of glue in these little corners, because we're going to go in and kind of mold the leather with our bone folder when we're sticking it all together. Alright, so once we have everything trimmed up, got our liner there, and this is our whole front situation, we need to make the keeper next. And the reason we did all this first is so that we can get the right size. So I have another strip of this leather. So the keeper is going to go in here. It's going to come around, and we need this to slide in between it. So that's how big it needs to be. So all I'm going to do is I have my full body, the full body of the bracelet here. I have the extra layer that represents the layer it's going to be tucked under, and I'm just going to take, well, I have a flat half here, and I want this to meet right about like this, right in the middle, and I'll show you why after. You can do this stitched, but we're not going to do it stitched. Then I'm going to fold this over, and I'm going to use my scratch awl to make a mark. Then we come down here, and I'm just going to cut this flush, or just straight. I don't know why I said flush. There we go. So you can stitch this. If you want to stitch this, what you have to do is you have to leave some extra so you can overlap. We're actually going to use a belt staple on a belt staple press that we have, and I'm going to show you that right now. So these are brass staples, and this is the press we install them with. So all we're going to do is we're going to put our staple in this little slot here, and then we take our keeper, we fold it around like this, and it's a foot press machine. So once I have this lined up, I'm going to hold this down like that, and then there we go. No stitching required, and you can use 2 staples on belt keepers. It's just really quick, and this is never going to break. So now we have our keeper real fast. So we're ready for the final glue up now. I'm going to take our little keeper and I'm going to put it staple side or stitch side in, and you can see now why we cut this a little bit short, our little liner piece here, because the keeper is the same thickness, so we want that to land right next to it. And then we're going to put our buckle on, if I can do it with one hand here. So what I've done is I've trimmed this end and I skived it down like I told you about. And this, now you can see with the reverse skive on this and the regular skive here, is going to lay down flat and become one thickness, and you'll just see a little tiny seam. And then we will glue this down. I'm going to put a stitch, just a single stitch right here and right here, wrapping around the bracelet to lock the buckle in, and that's how we'll look. So I'm going to get to gluing this up. I probably won't talk much because it is a little, not stressful, but I'm going to have to focus on it, but you get to see it all. So once we have this all glued in, you can see it's starting to really look like a bracelet now. I'm going to poke, just use my scratch awl, I'm going to poke a hole on either side of the buckle. And what we're going to do is, because we didn't glue this little part here, we're going to put a stitch wrapping around the outside to hold this in so that our buckle doesn't flop around all over the place. And I'm just going to eyeball it. You can measure it out if you want. I'm going to try to just get it in line with the bottom of our slot punch. And here's one side. And I'm kind of pulling the buckle a little bit so to keep tension there. And there's our other one. So now we're just going to kind of wrap some thread around there, tie a knot in the middle, poke it through, and then we'll get on to sizing the main body of the bracelet and stitching around the rest of it. Once we have that stitched, we have to get our holes laid out so that we can get our end punched, and then we can stitch the whole thing. So I've measured out how big my wrist is, and what I'm going to do is you can make the holes as far apart as you like. I'm just going to do probably 4, a ½ inch apart. And then I'm going to use my weaver punches to punch these out. After that, we're going to get our strap end punch, and I like to punch, it's like a little less than an inch from the last hole, just to make sure that the keeper will fit if I use the last hole. And there we go. And so now, this goes through here, this goes there, and you can kind of see where we're going. So all we have to do now, I'm going to sand the edges down, and then we'll stitch around the outside. And here we go. So I wanted to close up and show you this. When you go through all the trouble of doing, you know, we have our liner here that ends here, we put our keeper here, we stitch this down, this is what you end up with. Nice, slim, no bulk, everything lays nice and flat. And you can see here with the skive, so we have the strength of this leather wrapping around. I could have gone a little bit more aggressive on this, but I didn't want to mess it up. I'm not that good with a skiving knife. So, but you can see how it's all just one layer. And so while it is a simple project in its function, it's just a bracelet, you can go in and do some really nice details to make it a very nicely laying bracelet like this. So I'm just going to put it on, do a couple extra shots, and that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.